Okay, so at the end of the first year, the 18 employees in the sample are given a score. Their manager awards them a score between 1 and 10, and that's their performance score. So 10 is high performance. These guys were high performing. This guy was pretty low performing. 1 would be the lowest performance. This is the scatter graph of that information. And then it says the firm decides to find a Spearman's rank correlation coefficient for this data without calculation. Explain why it might not be appropriate to calculate a correlation coefficient for the whole sample of 18 students. So the whole sample would just be one correlation coefficient for them all. Now, if you look at the scatter graph, it doesn't look like there's much going on here, because they're all together. Now, what they're there's 2 marks for this question. So what they're looking for is that first you recognize there's 2 different departments. So there's a national department and an international department. So it might not be a good idea to put them all together because the departments are, because there's 2 different departments basically. So let me write that down here. So there are 2 different departments. Now, that's the first thing. And maybe you could put in at this point with 2 different managers awarding scores. So if you look at this, it looks like the international department are getting way lower scores than the national department guys. Now that seems, I don't know what that seems, but the question does say explain why it might not be. So this is all speculation. Who knows what's going on, but it might not be a good idea because look, these guys' scores are actually way lower than these guys' scores. These are like 10, 10, 9, 7, 8, 9, 8, and this is like there's only 1 8. There's no 9s, no 10s, and then a 4 and a 5 as well. So these guys' scores are way lower, even though their mark in the written assessment is actually higher. So you could say here, it appears the manager in the international department is harsher when awarding scores. So that's the 2 marks. The 2 marks is to one say there's 2 different departments with 2 different managers. That's your first mark. And the second mark is to say that it seems like this guy's these scores are lower. So maybe I should actually include that. The department is harsher because the scores are lower. Maybe I'll put that at the end. Awarding scores because the scores are lower. Okay, fine. That is part A, or part 1. Part 2. He says find RS, which is Spearman's rank correlation coefficient for the 7 employees working in the international department. So for these guys, now to find Spearman's rank correlation coefficient, we have to order them. So L, M, N, O, P, Q, R. So luckily, guys, these are in order. He's the best in the written assessment. So let's call this mark and score. So in the written assessment, he's the best, he's the second best, third best, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh best, and there's none of them are the same. So I can literally and easily just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then the score. It's not quite as simple, right? This guy is first, so fine, he gets first, but this guy is not second on his own. He's second and he's second, so we've basically got a second and a third. So what we do is we say like he's second and third, he's second and third, so we give them both 2.5. So he's 2.5 and he's 2.5. And then similarly here, so he's first, second, third, he's fourth and fifth. He's fourth and fifth, he's fourth and fifth. So this guy gets 4.5 and this guy gets 4.5. So you put the average between 4 and 5. And then he's sixth and he's seventh because he's the sixth best and he's the worst. Okay, now what do I do? Well, I just put in this information. So I'll call this mark, I'll call this score, and I'll put in this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And here I'll put, make sure they match, guys, 1, 2.5, 4.5, 2.5, 4.5, 6, and 7. Now it looks to me like there will be some correlation here, guys. Look, he's the best and he's the worst. He's the best and he's the worst, and there's a few things going on here, but it looks like good. There's going to be a good correlation here. So anyway, we do menu, statistics, stat calculations, linear regression. The X list is mark, the Y list is score. And we can do all this. This is fine. Save it to C. Press OK, and we get R is equal to 0.909241. Or S is equal to 0.909241. Or 0.909. Okay, that is part 2. Finally, he says, hence, comment on the validity of the written assessment as a measure of the level of performance of employees in this department. Justify your answer. So again, it's 2 marks, guys. It's 2 marks, and he says, comment on the validity. So you could say, the written assessment as a measure of the performance. The written assessment is or appears to be a good measure of level of performance. So that's your first mark, and then it says justify your answer. So why is it a good measure? This is because you got to put in the word rank here, because there is strong positive correlation between the rank of the mark and the rank of the score. That's enough. So 2 marks. Yes, it's a good measure of performance. Why? Because there's strong positive correlation, because we got the R equals 0.909. Okay, that is part C.